All right, picture this. It's the summer of 1984. Anthrax is a scrappy young thrash band out of New York City. They just dropped their debut album, Fistful of Metal, and things should be looking up. Instead, the band is an absolute dumpster fire behind the scenes. The problem, their frontman, Neil Turbin. Now look, Turbin wasn't a bad singer. The guy could scream, but the vibe inside the band had curdled into something genuinely toxic. The tension had been building for a while, but things finally boiled over when Turbin went behind everyone's backs and fired original bassist Dan Lilker. And here's the part that became an absolute Anthrax legend. Scott Ian claimed Turbin did it because Lilker was taller than him and kept stealing attention on stage. Whether or not that's the full truth, it perfectly captures how petty and personal things had gotten. Turbin, for his part, tells a different story. He says Scott Ian, drummer Joey Belladonna, and the band's management basically formed a little alliance against him, keeping him out of interviews, cutting him out of creative decisions, treating him like a replaceable mic stand. And creatively, he wanted to push the band toward a bigger, more melodic arena rock sound. The rest of the band wanted to go harder, heavier, and nastier. Neither side was going to budge. It was a dead end. On top of all that, influential rock journalist Eddie Trunk, who was tight with the band's label Megaforce Records, admitted he was actively in the ear of management, pushing them to get rid of Turbin because he wasn't feeling the vocal style. So it was coming from every direction. In August of 1984, Turbin was out, effectively pushed out the door. So now Anthrax has no singer, a label breathing down their necks, and the clock ticking. They briefly tried out a guy named Matt Fallon, who would later go on to front an early version of Skid Row, which is a wild footnote in rock history, but Fallon didn't stick. The band packed up and headed to Ithaca, New York to work on the Pyramid Sound Studios with producer Carl Canedy, who was the drummer of heavy metal band The Rods. And this is where the whole story takes a genuinely lucky turn. Canedy happened to know about a singer from upstate New York, a guy fronting a local band named Bible Black. He had a powerful voice, a huge range, and his name was Joey Belladonna. Canedy played the band some of Belladonna's tapes, and they were immediately hooked. So they called him up, completely out of the blue. The guy had never submitted a demo, never auditioned, never even reached out to them, and basically said, hey, come down to the studio. Now here's where it gets incredible. Belladonna shows up to the studio having no idea who Anthrax is. Zero, he didn't know what thrash metal was. He flies in on this tiny propeller plane, he walks into the studio, and to warm up his voice, he just starts belting out Lights by Journey. Classic arena rock, completely smooth, soaring, polished vocals. The guys in Anthrax are just standing there like, what is happening right now? But then they put on the instrumental track for a song called Medusa, which is heavy, fast, aggressive, and Belladonna he just locked in. His huge, clean tenor voice floated right over the top of all the chaos, and it worked. It more than worked. Joey Belladonna was listening over the phone and reported just said, that's it, sign him up, let's go. Just like that, the search was over. Before they can get fully into the big album, though, the band needed to introduce Joey to their fan base, and that's exactly where Armed and Dangerous comes in. Released in February 1985 through Megaforce Records, this 5-track EP was essentially a mission statement, a press release in vinyl form. It was saying, we fired our singer, we found someone better, and we're not going anywhere. The track list was a brilliant mix of old and new. The title track, Armed and Dangerous, opens with this gorgeous acoustic guitar intro, something no one expected from Anthrax, before exploding into heavy riffs with Belladonna absolutely soaring over the top. Then you've got Raised Hell, a blistering cut that didn't make the final album. A wild cover of Sex Pistols' God Save the Queen with mock English accents, which hammered home the band's hardcore punk roots. And then live and studio versions of Metal Thrashing Command and Panic from Fistful of Metal, which was the smartest move of all. Because fans could hear exactly how Belladonna reinvented songs that Turbin had sung. It wasn't even a competition. Later CD reissues, most notably the 1992 version, added 2 bonus tracks, Soldiers of Metal and Howling Furies. here's a twist. Those were pulled from Anthrax's original 1983 debut 7-inch single before all the lineup changes, so those tracks actually feature Neil Turbin on vocals and Dan Lilker on bass. You end up with this fascinating document where you can hear both eras of early Anthrax sitting side by side on the same release, a little piece of history hiding in a bonus track. Now, while all that EP stuff was happening, the real work was going in the studio. Recording Spreading the Disease was, to put it diplomatically, a process. The sessions nearly went off the rails because the band had originally tracked a huge chunk of the album's music with Matt Fallon on vocals before Belladonna came in. The producer, John Zazula, actually called the studio mid-session and ordered Fallon onto a bus home. Just like that, the band was sitting there with a fully completed instrumental record and no singer. That's a nightmare scenario. Belladonna came in and saved it, but it wasn't without its challenges. The guy came from a classic rock cover band background. The speed and intensity of thrash metal phrasing was completely foreign to him. He didn't know where to breathe, how to fit his melodies in between the riffs, how to pace himself when everything is moving at 100 miles an hour. Scott Ian literally sat with him in the studio line by line, walking him through the vocal structures, showing him how to ride the rhythm. It was a grind, but once Belladonna got the framework down, Ian stepped back and just let him fly, and all those soaring harmonies you hear all over the place can be heard on the record. The rhythm section of Ian and Benante was operating at another level during these sessions. Ian called his own playing style fascist guitar playing, and that tells you everything you need to know. Rigid, precise, zero room for sloppiness, down picking so tight and aggressive that it had to match Benante's double bass drumming beat for beat. The gear they used, a Jackson guitar, a TC electronic pedal, a Marshall JCM 800, that all gave them that legendary crunch that defines the record. The album came out and the lead single was Madhouse, and that song immediately took a life of its own. The music video was shot in a genuinely abandoned, freezing cold psychiatric ward in New York. Straitjackets, jumpsuits, chaos, a massive mosh pit right there in the middle of the ward. It was gritty, absurd, completely unhinged in the best possible way. When Megaforce submitted it to MTV, the network didn't just pass on it, they banned it, said it was offensive and demeaning to the mentally ill. Anthrax was thrilled. Scott Ian later said they wore that ban like a badge of honor. The label immediately put out press releases screaming that the video was too shocking for television, and the underground hype exploded. MTV actually caved when heavy metal became too mainstream to ignore, and Madhouse went on to be named one of the greatest hard rock songs of all time by VH1. And years later, horror legend Stephen King, a well-known metal fan, featured the song in a short story called You Like It Darker, where a character literally is tortured by having Madhouse blasted at them on a loop. Scott Ian was understandably delighted by that one. Beyond Madhouse, the album is stacked. You have AIR. It kicks things off with pure thrash fury. Armed and Dangerous, it's the emotional centerpiece. Of that beautiful acoustic intro. Medusa is one of the nastiest riffs on the whole record, and a distinction of being the only Anthrax song with a writing credit from label founder John Zazula. The Enemy goes somewhere genuinely dark, dealing with Holocaust themes in a way that shows the band was capable of a lot more than just speed and noise. And Gung Ho closes everything with Full Throttle, carrying some of Neil Turbin's lyrical DNA in the credits. Spreading the Disease launched Anthrax from the underground straight onto Island Records and into a mainstream conversation of heavy metal. But here's the thing. While all this was happening, something else was brewing on the side. Because Scott Ian, Charlie Benante, and Dan Lilker, yes, that Dan Lilker, were about to get together with a loudmouth vocalist named Billy Molano and record one of the most chaotic, offensive, and really important records in the history of metal crossover. Something called Speak English or Die. Stormtroopers of Death was coming, and that's a whole other story. That will be my next video. In the meantime, check out this playlist with Anthrax, the story of Anthrax. I'm going to do all of the Anthrax albums and side projects. Hopefully get it all done before the new album comes out. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. See you in the next one.